Hello.
If I had known that asking one simple question would unravel my entire reality, I probably still would have asked it, but I might have done it with armor on. That's the thing with family. You spend so many years thinking there's a solid foundation beneath your feet, that no matter how tilted the house feels in a storm, the walls will hold. But then someone shifts a single brick, and suddenly you're staring into the basement of everything you thought you knew. That night began like a dream. A shimmering, expensive, suspiciously perfect dream. We were all seated around a long table dressed in white linen, the kind that feels starched and almost too pristine to touch. The silverware looked like something out of an estate auction catalog, ornate, engraved, and heavy. Crystal glasses sparkled like they had never tasted tap water. Even the napkins were monogrammed in gold thread. My parents, Robert and Martha Duval, had truly outdone themselves for their 30th wedding anniversary dinner. Candles flickered from the polished candelabras, casting a glow that made everything look softer, even the lines around my father's stern mouth and the usual tension in my mother's eyes. Toasts had been made. Wine had been poured. My younger brother Graham had already knocked his chair back while dramatically declaring how grateful he was to be raised by such legends, and our sister Jennifer, ever the center of attention, had dabbed fake tears from her perfectly mascaraed lashes as she clinked her flute against Dad's. I sat quietly, smiling like I always did. I knew my role in these family productions. I played it well. As the dinner plates were cleared and dessert arrived, a trio of elaborate miniature cakes because Mom believed in options, I saw my father push back his chair and stand, glass raised. My mother joined him, looping her arm through his with the same theatrical grace I had seen at every church gala and Rotary dinner. "There's one more thing," he said, and the room fell into that delighted hush reserved for surprise announcements. "Next week," he continued, glancing at Mom, who beamed like a debutante on a pageant stage, "we're all flying to Bali. 1 week in paradise. The whole family. Together." There was a pause, a beat of silence, before it erupted cheers, applause, glasses lifted again, and excited whispers bouncing from one end of the table to the other, like an electric current. Graham's wife started talking about swimwear shopping. Jennifer's kids were already arguing over who'd get the window seat on the plane. Even Grandma Martha, in her beaded champagne-colored dress, let out a soft, warm chuckle. And then I did it. I smiled, genuinely, my heart opening just a little, and I asked the question. The question that would detonate whatever fragile harmony existed under that glossy surface. "What time is the flight?" I asked, my voice light, curious, nothing more than a casual follow-up, like someone eager to start packing. The moment the words left my mouth, I felt it, the shift. The temperature in the room didn't drop, but the warmth vanished. My father's smile faltered. His eyes, usually narrowed in sharp calculation, went cold. Not confused. Not surprised. Just blank. And then, hard. "You don't know," he said, slowly, his voice suddenly louder than it needed to be, cutting through the clinking and laughter. "That's because you're not part of us." My fork paused midair. "You can stay here," he added, with a cruel sort of finality. "Watch the kids. Someone needs to, after all." A silence fell so dense and sudden that I heard someone cough, and even that sounded too loud. The waitress hovering near the table took a step back. Jennifer's kids stopped giggling. Graham cleared his throat and looked away. No one said anything. Not one word. The cake in front of me had 3 perfect layers: lemon curd, chocolate mousse, and raspberry cream, and I stared at it like it could explain what had just happened. I don't know how long I sat there, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, every muscle in my body humming like I had been tapered, but couldn't fall down. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just smiled, tightly, and picked up my wine glass. "That's fine," I said, with a composure that felt foreign, like I was borrowing it from another woman, someone who didn't just get excommunicated in front of her family during what was supposed to be a celebration. But inside, something was already unraveling. Or maybe it was waking up. Later that night, in the guest room I always stayed in when visiting, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, still dressed in my cocktail dress, makeup smudged at the corners of my eyes. The chandelier above me looked like a spider made of diamonds. From downstairs, I could hear laughter again, soft now, dulled by distance and drywall. They hadn't even paused. They hadn't come to check on me. Not Jennifer. Not Graham. Not Mom. And certainly not Dad. I sat up slowly, my body stiff from holding everything in. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message from my cousin Layla. "Hey, I thought you were coming to Bali too." That was so weird. "Are you okay?" I stared at the screen. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard and then stopped. What was I supposed to say? "I've been disowned in the most passive-aggressive way possible. Apparently I'm the nanny now. I'm fine. Just not surprised." In the end, I didn't reply. I set the phone face down. Because the truth was, I wasn't okay. But I wasn't surprised, either. To be honest, there had always been an invisible line, one I wasn't sure I'd crossed or simply been born on the wrong side of. Growing up, I had been the quiet one, the observant one. Not the golden child, not the family beauty, not the prodigy. Just me. I was the one who got straight A's and washed the dishes when no one asked. The one who picked up Grandma's prescriptions and filled out Dad's tax forms when he couldn't be bothered. The one who remembered anniversaries and birthdays and everyone's favorite flowers. And for all that effort, I was labeled dependable. A utility. A background character in a story I never got to narrate. And now this. The final verdict. I thought about leaving. I really did. Thought about packing my suitcase and driving away from that massive, cold house in the hills, where everything was curate and nothing was real. But something stopped me. Not pride. Not defiance. Something else. Curiosity. Because my father hadn't just made an offhand comment in poor taste. He had delivered a line that felt rehearsed. Deliberate. Like something long planned. And that meant there was more to the story. The next morning, I rose early, still in my clothes from the night before, and made my way downstairs. The house was silent, the kind of silence that felt watched. I moved quietly, like an intruder in my own childhood home. In the kitchen, Jennifer sat barefoot at the counter, scrolling through her phone, a mug of coffee in front of her. She looked up when I entered, and for a brief second, something flickered in her expression. Guilt, maybe, or pity. Or worse, smugness. "Hey," she said, too brightly. "Rough night." I didn't answer. I opened the cabinet, pulled down a mug, poured myself coffee, and sat across from her. "You knew," I said. She blinked. "What?" "You knew I wasn't invited to Bali." Her smile twitched, faltered. She looked away, then back at me. "I mean, I didn't think they'd actually say it like that," she said. "I thought maybe they'd talk to you privately. Not in front of everyone. But you knew." She hesitated. "Yeah." I nodded slowly, let the words hang in the air. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to cry. But I wasn't going to pretend either. "Why?" I asked, finally. "What did I do?" She sipped her coffee. "It's not about what you did," she said, a little too fast. "It's about who you are." And there it was again, that invisible line. Drawn with a glittering pen I'd never been handed. But I wasn't going to sit quietly anymore. Something was wrong. Deeper than hurt feelings or family favoritism. There was something underneath all of this. A secret, maybe, or a plan I hadn't been meant to stumble into. My father's voice kept replaying in my head, over and over like a scratched record. "You're not part of us. Not anymore. Not ever." And if I wasn't part of them, maybe it was time to find out why. Because the truth, the real truth, was something they clearly didn't want me to know. Sometimes, when people betray you, it doesn't come with a scream or a door slammed in your face. Sometimes it comes with a smile so practiced, so falsely sweet, you almost wonder if you imagine the knife twisting in your back at all. The morning after that dinner, the night my father decided to excise me from the family vacation like I was an expired coupon in his wallet, I woke up with the dull weight of rage pressing against my chest like a sleeping animal. It didn't have teeth yet, but it was waking up. Slowly, cautiously, hungry, I sat on the edge of the guest bed, still dressed in my rumpled black cocktail dress from the night before, and stared at my reflection in the antique mirror across the room. My mascara had smudged into faint bruises beneath my eyes, and my hair was bent in odd angles from the pillow, but I didn't move to fix any of it. Somehow, I wanted to see myself like this. Unvarnished, raw, the woman left behind. Downstairs, I could already hear the usual morning routine, the clatter of cutlery, the rhythmic hum of my mother's coffee machine, the sound of laughter bouncing off the walls like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't been cut from the itinerary of their golden family fantasy. Like I wasn't upstairs, sitting alone in a dress that had cost me 3 shifts of overtime and a bit of my soul. I finally rose and padded down the stairs barefoot, not bothering with pretense. I could feel my own detachment hovering just behind my eyes like a second pair of eyelids, blinking over the truth. The dining room smelled like bacon and syrup, that ridiculous, syrupy sweetness that feels like a lie when you're hurting. Jennifer was already seated at the table in a pale blue robe, flipping through her phone with one perfectly manicured hand, a fork dangling from the other like it weighed nothing. Graham sat beside her, nursing his coffee with the familiar, self-satisfied slouch he always adopted around the family, confident without having earned it. As I entered the room, I watched their expressions shift like clouds rearranging for convenience, subtle, but unmistakable. Jennifer gave me that tight-lipped smile women use when they want to seem polite without making space, and Graham actually had the audacity to nod like I was a guest they didn't know too well. "Morning," I said softly, my voice flatter than I intended, but no one seemed to mind. Jennifer cleared her throat delicately and set her phone face down like she was doing me a kindness. "Dad's out back, on the phone with the travel agent," she said. "They're upgrading the resort package. Butler service, private infinity pool, all that." She laughed, the sound just a little too sharp. "You know Dad. He goes all in once he's decided." I poured myself a cup of coffee in silence. I could feel my heart trying to beat faster, but I anchored it with the weight of every time I had swallowed something bitter in this house. Every holiday spent standing behind the stove while everyone else sat down. Every babysitting favor that turned into a weekend. Every doctor's appointment I took my mother to when she was too tired to drive. Every gas bill I paid quietly so the heat wouldn't be turned off in the dead of winter. I stirred in the cream slowly, deliberately. Then I turned. "So," I said, my voice calm, dangerously so, "has anyone thought about who's actually watching the kids? Or are you all just assuming I'll stay behind like a damn houseplant?" Graham winced. He never liked it when I spoke plainly. "Come on, it's not like that," he said, giving me that rehearsed look of awkward sympathy that always made me want to throw something heavy at his head. "You know how Dad gets." He was probably just, I don't know, being dramatic. Dramatic? I laughed, but it didn't sound like a laugh. It sounded like something breaking in half. He was specific, Graham. He looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't part of this family. Jennifer set down her fork, finally meeting my gaze. "You're overreacting," she said, too smoothly. It was a tense moment. He'd had wine. He didn't mean it like that. I raised one eyebrow. Then how, exactly, did he mean it? Neither of them responded. Instead, they both returned to their food, which somehow still looked appetizing to them. The eggs, the toast, the jam. It all smelled like betrayal and butter. "I see," I said. "So no one's actually going to say I should come." Graham rubbed the back of his neck. "It's complicated, you know? The rooms are already booked. It's kind of late to change the... Right, I interrupted, holding up a hand. Let's not pretend this is about logistics. If you wanted me there, I'd be there. But you don't. They said nothing, and honestly, that said everything. I excused myself from the table with a polite smile, the kind I had used at funerals, board meetings, and weddings where I was the only single woman over 30. The kind of smile that says, I'm fine, even while the edges of your soul are smoldering. Back in the guest room, I pulled out my suitcase and began folding the dress I had worn, the same one my mother had side-eyed when I walked into the anniversary dinner because it wasn't quite formal enough, and carefully laid it between layers of tissue paper like I was packing away a skin I no longer needed. I wasn't staying another night in that house. I didn't care if my name was on the emergency contact list. I didn't care if I was the one who paid the balance on Jennifer's unpaid tuition 10 years ago when she flunked out of college and called me sobbing. I didn't care if I was the one who picked up Graham's kids from daycare the day his wife forgot. I didn't care because suddenly it hit me they never had. They loved my usefulness. Not me. In the car, driving away from the estate, I tried to remember the last time someone in my family had asked how I was doing without following it up with a request. The silence in my mind answered before I could. I pulled into my apartment complex an hour later, parked in my assigned space, the one I'd fought tooth and nail for when the building updated their parking policy, and sat there for a long moment before stepping out. My apartment was small but mine, filled with soft lighting and second-hand books and plants that didn't need much to survive but still grew, slowly, stubbornly. I stood in the middle of my living room and stared at the photo on the shelf, the one from 5 years ago, Christmas morning, when I had made cinnamon rolls from scratch and bought matching pajamas for the whole family. I'd even wrapped the presents in color-coded paper. That year, Dad gave me a fruit basket. Jennifer got a gold bracelet. I walked over, picked up the frame, and without much thought, turned it face down. The following days passed in a strange fog, part disbelief, part fury, part something harder to name. I went through the motions at work, smiling at clients, responding to emails, but inside, I was pacing, clawing, unraveling. I kept waiting for someone to call. No one did. Not my mother, who had once called me in tears when the dog had a seizure and asked me to drive 2 hours to the emergency vet. Not Graham, who had asked me to help him refinance his mortgage when he maxed out 3 credit cards and needed a cosigner. Not Jennifer, who had sobbed in my arms during her second divorce and said I was the only constant in her life. None of them. I started to realize something deeply uncomfortable. I had not been a sister. I had been a service. A convenience. A silent support beam in a house where no one remembered I held up the roof. And the most painful part wasn't that they didn't love me. It was that they didn't even see me. That Sunday, I visited the park near my apartment, the one with the koi pond and the old stone bench under the weeping willow. I used to come here when I needed clarity or silence, or just to feel like I existed in a world that didn't require anything from me. I sat on the bench and opened my notebook, the one I carried with me always, soft leather bound, filled with half-thoughts and dream fragments and observations I was too afraid to say aloud. I turned to a blank page and began to write. They love how I show up, not that I'm there. They love what I do, not who I am. When I give them something, they say thank you. When I ask for something, they change the subject. When I stay silent, they fill the space with noise. When I speak up, they call it dramatic. I am their shadow, their scaffolding, their soft place to land. And I am so tired of being their cushion. I want to be seen. Or I want to be gone. But I won't be invisible anymore. Not for them. Not for anyone. I closed the notebook slowly and felt something shift inside my chest, not quite peace, but something closest to resolve. Because I was done being their hidden backbone. The one they leaned on without ever saying thank you. The one they expected to carry the weight and the blame and the silence. Something had broken inside me, and I wasn't planning on gluing it back together. Not this time. You can only hold a match to your own skin for so long before you either burn completely or finally decide to drop it. It had been nearly a week since that dinner, since my father sliced me out of the family vacation plans with the precision of a surgeon who didn't believe in anesthesia. And in that week, I hadn't cried, hadn't begged, and hadn't even ranted the way I used to do silently into my pillow when the weight of being the family's invisible backbone threatened to splinter my ribs from the inside. I had simply made decisions. Not dramatic ones. Not cruel ones. Just necessary ones. Surgical ones, if you will. I spent that week going through my finances, all the little threads I had tied neatly into their lives without ever once being asked to, or thanked for, or, God forbid, included because of. I had thought I was being generous. Noble. I thought I was being the kind of daughter you're supposed to be when your parents get older and your siblings turn chaotic and the whole thing starts to resemble a crumbling building with too much history to demolish. But now I saw it for what it was. I had been scaffolding. A structural crutch they leaned on so often they forgot it wasn't actually made of steel. And so, like any woman finally done playing savior, I sat at my desk with a glass of red wine, pulled up each account, and began the quiet process of letting it all go. The mortgage auto payments for my parents' summer cottage? Disabled. The family emergency credit card, the one I'd foolishly left in their drawer in case someone needed help? Cancelled. The childcare app one used to cover backup babysitters for Graham and his wife when they conveniently forgot it was their weekend? Deleted. And perhaps the most poetic of all, the airline rewards account I'd been using to book everyone's travel points, including the Bali flights? Locked. New password. Only mine. I didn't warn them. I didn't gloat. I didn't so much as breathe a hint of what I was doing. Because this wasn't about revenge. This was about finally giving them what they claimed they always wanted, a world where I wasn't there. When the day of their grand departure rolled around, the date stamped on my memory not because I was going but because I was expected to stay behind. I arrived at the house dressed in the kind of crisp white linen pants and oversized sunglasses that screamed silent confidence. I didn't knock. I used the key they still hadn't asked me to return. Inside, it was chaos. The kind of chaos only our family could produce on a deadline. Jennifer was barking orders at a red-faced teenager, dragging 3 pink roller bags down the stairs. Graham was yelling about sunscreen. His wife was chasing their youngest, who was buck naked and wielding a juice box like a weapon. My mother stood in the middle of the hallway, clutching a clipboard and trying to look composed while barking instructions in her church voice. No one noticed me at first. Which, honestly, was fitting. But they would. Oh, they absolutely would. I waited until they'd all assembled in the dining room, the very same room where I had been excised like an unwelcome guest 7 days ago. It was filled with carry-on bags, chargers, neck pillows, and a stack of passports that Jennifer was carefully triple-checking as if her life depended on it. My father was standing at the head of the table, drink in hand, giving some rambling speech about the importance of family time, unaware that the scaffolding he'd always leaned on was about to walk out the door with its own passport and not one regret. I cleared my throat once. Firmly. No drama. Just volume. They all turned. I smiled. Not the tight, polite smile I used to use. Not the mask. This one was real, the kind of smirk that comes when you're standing in the ruins of something you didn't break, but you're finally done pretending you didn't notice the cracks. Hi, everyone, I began, raising the glass I'd brought with me, a fizzy citrus drink I'd bought from my favorite Greek cafe downtown, because yes, it was already foreshadowing. I just wanted to stop by before you all head off to paradise. They stared at me like I was a ghost that had suddenly decided to walk through walls. Jennifer frowned, trying to place the tone in my voice. Graham looked like he had just remembered he'd left the stove on. My mother's smile froze mid-lipstick. I hope the flights go smoothly, I continued, letting the edge of amusement enter my tone. Though, actually, you might want to double-check your bookings. The points account used to reserve the tickets? That was under my name. And it's been adjusted. A slow silence began to settle in, the kind that spreads like cold air through a crack in the window. But I'm sure you'll figure it out, I went on, each word slow and deliberate, like a surgeon unraveling a careful stitch. After all, you're also resourceful. Jennifer's jaw twitched. My father finally blinked. I also thought I should mention, I said, lifting my glass again in a mock toast, that while you're in Bali, you'll need to figure out how to pay for everything yourselves. The accounts I've been covering? Closed. The card you've used for emergencies? Cancelled. My mother let out a small, stunned gasp. And the babysitter you all expect for free? I tilted my head, smiling sweetly at Graham and his wife. Unavailable. Permanently. Chaos doesn't arrive like thunder. It arrives like a heartbeat that skips, then another, until everything is off rhythm and no one can find the beat again. My father stepped forward, voice tight. You did what? I won't be staying here, I continued, ignoring the panic blossoming in their eyes like a gorgeous, vindicating flower. I'll be in Greece. Alone. With no phone. For once, I'm choosing me. My mother actually reached for a chair, her knuckles pale against the wood. Jennifer sputtered. Wait, you can't just… What about the kids? Who's going to? Not me, I said, soft but unyielding. And that was when the house began to shake. Not literally, of course, but emotionally, spiritually, practically. Because without me, no one knew where the snacks were packed. No one knew the code to the family health insurance portal. No one remembered the kids' allergies. No one had the charger for the iPods. No one knew how to calm the youngest child during turbulence or how to translate the phrase "no ice" into Indonesian for the resort's kitchen. And suddenly, as the kids began to scream, as Graham turned pale, as Jennifer started yelling into her phone, as my mother tried to call the travel agent and found herself locked out of the system, it all became gloriously, stunningly clear. They had never appreciated the structure because they assumed the walls were permanent. Now they were realizing the walls had left the building. My father, red-faced and breathing hard, turned on me with the full weight of his disappointment, the same disappointment he wielded like a weapon my whole life. This is petty, he hissed. You're punishing us like a child. This is a family. I stepped toward him calmly. You told me I wasn't part of this family, I reminded him, my voice like glass, cool, dangerous, sharp. I'm just respecting that boundary. His mouth opened, closed. No sound came out. And for the record, I added, sweeping my gaze around the room, this isn't punishment. This is withdrawal of service. You've been overdrawn for years. Jennifer stood up suddenly, as if she had a last-minute apology prepared, something that would smooth this all over the way she always did when she got caught mid-lie. But I raised a hand. Don't, I said. Don't give me the speech about how I'm overreacting. Don't tell me how he didn't mean it. Don't offer me a seat at a table I was never invited to. You had your chance. Graham's daughter started crying. His wife yelled something from the hallway. My mother frantically waved her phone in the air like she could summon signal from sheer panic. I turned, headed for the door, and paused only once more, not for effect, but for the quiet punctuation I knew I deserved. I hope Bali is everything you dreamed of, I said over my shoulder. I'll be sipping wine on a balcony in Santorini. And unlike you, I won't need anyone else to pay for it. And with that, I walked out. No tears. No second guesses. Just the sound of kids screaming, adults scrambling, and a life I had finally stepped out of, like a dress I had worn for far too long. Back in my car, I felt it, not peace exactly, but something cleaner. A kind of stillness I hadn't known in years. I turned on the radio. Let the wind come through the open window. The sky above me was pale and wide and full of possibility. I didn't know what Greece would be like. I didn't know what would happen next. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was no longer their scaffolding. The first thing I noticed when I arrived at the airport wasn't the weight of my suitcase. though it was heavier than usual with clothes that whispered freedom and sandals that had never walked the familiar, dutiful paths of my old life, but the lightness in my chest, like someone had unbuckled the harness I didn't even realize I'd been wearing for decades. For once, I wasn't double-checking boarding passes for someone else. I wasn't scanning for forgotten passports or snacks or last-minute pharmacy runs because Graham's kid forgot to pack his inhaler. I wasn't standing near a rental van, guiding a parade of overgrown toddlers disguised as adults through security lines, managing their moods like I was a flight attendant for emotional turbulence. This time, I was just a woman with her own boarding pass, her own suitcase, and her own plans. No backup diapers. No noise-canceling headphones packed for nieces. No emergency contact list with my name starred at the top. Just me. It wasn't until the plane lifted off, the ground shrinking beneath me like a metaphor I didn't have to spell out, that I let myself exhale completely. I hadn't realized how tightly I'd been holding my breath all these years. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just sat there, eyes closed, letting the pressure in my chest shift to something gentler, something warmer, something real. When the pilot announced our descent into Athens, I turned my phone back on out of habit, not because I planned to use it. The moment the signal returned, my screen flooded like a burst dam. 18 messages from Jennifer. 9 missed calls from Mom. 3 voicemails from Graham, one with his voice raised, the next with it cracking. Even my father, Robert Duvall, a man who once told me emotions are for people without plans, had sent a text. A single line. Call me, please. I didn't open a single one. Not because I wanted revenge. Not because I was angry. And certainly not because I wanted them to suffer. But because I was tired. I was done being on call for a family that only noticed I existed when something went wrong. I was finished playing lighthouse to a ship that refused to admit it was lost. I switched the phone to airplane mode, even though I was already on the ground, and slipped it into my bag like a relic from another life. The ferry to Santorini was crowded and noisy, full of travelers with glossy maps and windswept smiles, the kind of people who laugh easily and never think to wonder what it means to be the one doing the caretaking in every scene of your life. I found a seat near the edge of the deck and watched the water churn below, navy blue with streaks of foam, endless and alive, stretching out like it had been waiting for me this whole time. There's something unexplainably healing about watching water move, especially when your whole life has been built around stillness and sacrifice. Each wave felt like a wordless affirmation, like the ocean itself was whispering, "You're allowed. You're allowed. You're allowed." I closed my eyes, tilted my face to the sun, and listened. The villa I'd rented was perched high above the caldera, carved into the cliffside like a secret whispered to the sea. Whitewashed walls, blue shutters, and bougainvillea tumbling down the stone like laughter. It was the kind of place I never would have allowed myself to dream about before, too indulgent, too far, too self-serving. But now, I realized that was the point. I was choosing me. No schedules. No obligations. No emergencies to fix. Just the rhythmic sound of waves and the quiet crackle of my own thoughts unfolding for the first time without interruption. In the mornings, I made coffee in the little terracotta pot left by the host and sipped it on the terrace, barefoot, hair uncrushed, heart unburdened. I didn't scroll through messages. I didn't check voicemails. I didn't even open the apps that used to be reflex, reminders, shared calendars, endless email threads marked urgent when all they really meant was, "I forgot something and need you to care." In the afternoons, I wandered through cobblestone alleys lined with blue doors and sun-bleached signs. I ate stuffed grape leaves at tiny tavernas where no one asked me to split the bill or cover the tip. I bought handmade jewelry from women who called me Cormu and tucked free olives into my bag with a wink. I let myself laugh with strangers. I let myself say no to things I didn't want. I let myself sit in silence and not feel guilty. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't managing anyone else's experience. I was living my own. On the fourth day, as the sun began to set in the kind of way that makes your chest ache from how much beauty the world can hold, I found myself seated on a smooth stone wall overlooking the sea. The sky was brushed with lavender and gold, streaked with tangerine light that made the white buildings glow like something out of a dream. I pulled out my notebook, the same one I'd used to vent, to mourn, to plan my quiet exit, and opened to a blank page. This time, I didn't write lists. I didn't tally who owed me what or what I'd given without thanks. I didn't make plans or strategies. Instead, I just wrote. I'm not bitter. I'm just done. I spent years trying to be the good daughter, the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who always came through. But I was never seen, only used. I was the stagehand, not the star. The cook, not the guest. The plan B when someone else dropped the ball. And still I smiled. Still I stayed. Still I told myself, this is what family is. But maybe, just maybe, family isn't meant to be a job. Maybe love isn't supposed to feel like obligation. Maybe being wanted isn't the same as being needed. And maybe being needed isn't love at all. I am not the emergency contact anymore. I am not the invisible backbone holding up their illusion. I am a woman who walked away. And finally, I am free. I let the wind dry the ink before closing the notebook, gently, like sealing something sacred. Later that evening, after a long walk along the moonlit paths of Oia, I returned to the villa and, for reasons I still don't fully understand, I turned my phone back on. Maybe I was curious. Maybe I wanted closure. Maybe I just wanted proof that I had made the right choice. The notifications rolled in like a tsunami. A group text from my siblings, panic disguised as humor. Jennifer. So weird, we can't access the travel points. Must be a glitch. Graham. Did something happen with the backup babysitter? We can't get a hold of her. My mother. Call me immediately. Your father is very upset. This has gone too far. My father, surprisingly direct. I didn't mean what I said. I was angry. Please come home. We'll talk. I didn't reply. Not out of spite. Not out of cruelty. But because I had spent too many years replying to things that didn't deserve answers. And now I was finally at peace with the silence. The next morning, I woke early and made my way down to the beach, a quiet, secluded cove I'd discovered by accident on my first day. The sand was cool beneath my feet, and the sea stretched out in front of me like an unwritten story. A woman nearby was reading under a straw hat. A couple passed by holding hands. I sat near the water, knees pulled to my chest, and watched the waves lap the shore like the world wasn't ending, like it never had been in danger of falling apart at all. And, for the first time in as long as I could remember, I smiled without effort. Not because I had won something. Not because I had proven a point. Not because anyone would see it and be proud. But because I felt light. Whole. Real. It turns out, when you stop trying to earn love by setting yourself on fire, you start to notice how beautiful the world looks when it isn't backlit by resentment. They would go on, I knew that. They'd find someone else to absorb the impact of their chaos. Maybe for a while, they'd struggle. Maybe they'd miss the structure I had always provided, like oxygen they didn't notice until it was gone. But I wasn't their air anymore. And I wasn't coming back. They thought I'd always be there. But sometimes, the quiet one is the one holding the whole house up. And when she walks away, everything falls. Have you ever been treated like the help in your own family? What would you have done in her shoes? Let's talk about it.
Bye bye.